Hello. Purpose of this video is to give you a behind-the-scenes look at exactly what's involved in making a custom Zendrum. And by custom, I mean this is a brand new body shape. This is my custom shop Zendrum. So before we get too far into it, I just want to give you a little bit of background on why I've gone this route for the design and what, led me to this approach in playing. So we'll start with the original Zendrum. In fact, this is my very first Zendrum, 20 some odd years ago. Still plays great, still a wonderful instrument. This Zendrum came out and it was really a great cosmetic design. And when people would play it, obviously you'd wear it on a strap. Your right hand had access to a lot of buttons. Your left hand had access to this. When you started trying to reach over, as you can see, my shoulder and my arm is starting to move a little bit more. It kind of limited my range of motion with the left hand. Now, it's still a great instrument. Even today, it's still a wonderful design. But it was primarily right-handed. It favored the right hand. Now, we went from that Zendrum in the evolutionary chain, so to speak. The next thing that happened was the invention of the laptop Zendrum. Another great instrument. Now, for me, I immediately asked David to put strap locks on this thing when I first saw a prototype of this being made, and I go ahead and wear it. Again, it's over my left shoulder, so I've got access to everything with my right hand. The left hand, all of a sudden, I got access to more pads. However, because everything was kind of condensed in a smaller frame, it meant that I had to play more with my fingertips, which is fine, but not every Zendrummer plays with just the fingertips. I have that other video showing the breakdown of different technique styles. So it was a little bit limiting in the techniques that I could approach this instrument with, just because the buttons were so close together, the triggers. Next part of the Zendrum evolution, the next big step, was the introduction of the Z4 circuit. Now, this is the prototype Zendrum Z4, soon to go back to David to hang in the museum. With the Zendrum Z4 and the introduction of Zen Edit, all of a sudden you can really do a lot of great things with this instrument. A lot of the potential that was kind of locked up in the circuit board. And remember, we're using the little 4-button controller to access all these things. When you add Zen Edit into it, now you can actually dial in each and every individual trigger. So to further complement that, David decided, you know what, we're going to allow people to put pads wherever they want. Within reason, obviously, they have to fit. So this was my Zendrum ZX layout from that point forward. You notice this spot right here that's empty. That's where my heel more or less sits. And my right hand would hover in this position. My left hand would hover in this position. Again, I have full access with the right hand. But then the left hand, again, I could get up a little bit, but I'm still pulling my shoulder and the muscles in my arm to make this angle and this turn. And I wanted to move it in another direction to get more of my left hand capabilities onto the instrument, which has led us to this new custom shop Zendrum that I created off of my design. So, if you'll notice, it still has the same overall look of the Zendrum. In fact, it's basically the same rough cut, but I've flipped it over. And in flipping it over, I also angled a different piece of the instrument itself. But now you'll see I have much more ability to get my left hand involved on more triggers. And the only reason I'm looking for more triggers, it's more voices, it's more articulations, it's a better way for me to express myself musically when I'm playing. Now I'm going to get into positionals playing and the concept of why this design is the way it is, but I thought we'd first take a look at what went into putting this together. This was a 6-month process just to go from the drawing to the final actual instrument. So let's take a look at what we've got put together in a little slideshow so you can see what's going on. Okay, so for my custom shop Zendrum, started with a scale drawing that I put together on Photoshop. And it had to be scale because we had to make sure that the triggers would fit on the wood. Then David went out and found a raw piece of zebra wood, which was absolutely beautiful and highly figured. Now the first cut was made just like every other Zendrum ZX. And just like every other Zendrum ZX, he stencils in the final cut, the second cut. So before we made that second cut, we wanted to make sure everything fit. So we took my design and he used that to make the first mock-up with triggers to make sure everything would actually fit on the wood once he cut it. Now we see the second set of cuts, and we do a second mock-up, and the triggers and everything still fit. Now for this Zendrum, it's got a different cut angle, so we had to come up with a new angled cut, which was difficult because it's totally inside. You're not starting on one edge and just cutting in. You have to cut in on both sides of this cut. And this was all done by hand by David Haney. And his woodworking is incredible. You can't tell that this was all cut with a handsaw. The next thing we did, David put a first coat of oil on it and went through the process of tongue oil, sanding, tongue oil, and sanding to bring it down into its final shape and smooth everything out. Now, while he was doing that, I went ahead and changed my graphic design to add the look of the zebra wood, just to kind of tie everything together. David then laid out the triggers on it to compare it against the photo, and everything lined up exactly as it was in the photo. Cool. Now, at this point, David has to flip the Zendrum over and hand carve out the back. Now, on all Zendrum ZXs and on all laptops, he has jigs that help him along with this, but since this was a totally different design, he had to do all of this by hand, carving out the back and then drilling the holes. Again, throughout this entire process, he's adding tongue oil and sanding to refine the finish. The only real true part that we had to get made for this was a new custom jack plate, which was similar to what we use on the Zap, but this was set up to work off of the back right side of my Zendrum. And now we have the final assembly, which leads us to the Zendrum. Now, I'm going to give you an example, or I'm going to try to explain why I set this up this way. I'm actually borrowing from a common occurrence that happens with a lot of other instruments. And for instance, if you're playing a frame drum, the frame drum itself, you'll hold it a specific way that's very natural. Right hand and left hand is kind of underneath. And that lends itself to the same approach that my hands take on this instrument. If you're playing an electric bass or a guitar, your hands will move in the same positions naturally. Now, guitar players and bass players, they do what's called positional playing. So their hand will anchor in one position and be able to play a full set of scales or lines and whatnot, and then they'll move to another position to go ahead and play something else. Same principles have been brought into this new custom shop Zendrum. So I'll explain how I approach this and the zones. Basically, I have 3 zones, 3 for each hand, with an overlapping section. Now, the instrument itself has 30 pads on it. This is about as maxed out. In fact, it is as maxed out as you can get. There's absolutely nothing else that you can add to this instrument. It's completely stuffed. In fact, David had to more or less have Chris, his son, sit on the back plate just to be able to close it to get the screws in. So there's not much more you could. In fact, there's nothing else you can do. This is completely maxed out. Now, we didn't set out to make it maxed out. One thing led to another, and here we go. Now, the way I've got it set up is I can wear it over my right shoulder and anchor it right here in my lap, and it'll sit without, it doesn't matter what I do with my hands. Now, this is great because I can go ahead and play the instrument without worrying about where my thumb would be on the other ZX, where I would anchor it to hold it down. Again, I'm not exerting much pressure on my hands. And the whole thing here is it's all about economy of motion. I don't want to have to do that shoulder stretch that I used to have to do on the old Zendrum, because that would tighten up all the muscles, and I'm trying to use my fingertips. Now I'm very relaxed. Everything fits great. Everything feels exactly where it's supposed to be. I can also then, if I want to stand up or whatnot, I can go ahead and flip it over to the other shoulder, and it still sits relatively in the same spot. The angle changes a little bit, but I'm still in the right spot. Now, I've already mentioned that I've got 30 triggers on the face plate of this, and many of you know that I prefer to use my feet also. So I have 2 jacks coming out of this, one going to a foot pedal and the other one going to a hi-hat pedal, which gives me the ability to have controllable hi-hats. Now, in addition to that, I have on the back 2 hold buttons, and the volume knob. Basically, it's just a potentiometer that's wired in too. So now I have control over the overall volume of B-52. When I'm on a gig, I can actually set my computer completely off to the side, and I don't have to go I don't have to use it at all. I don't have to touch it. I turn it on, it automatically loads B-52. I play the gig, and when I'm done, I just turn the computer off and I leave. It's great. So, to get back to the design, now that you know about all the different parts, we'll talk about the positions that are being used. I'm going to go ahead and sling it over the shoulder here just to give myself a little bit better chance at explaining this. Looking at the right hand, you'll see that it's more or less a paw print kind of a design, with the bass drum at the bottom. As I just slide a little bit farther forward, I have my hi-hats, and I have my ride cymbal. Everything's sitting right there. As I slide my hand just a little bit farther forward, I have snare drum, percussion. This is what I consider my home position, my first position on the Zendrum, because I can get to everything without having to really worry about moving my hand all over the other areas of the instrument. Now, first position for the left hand sits right here. And to make it easier for me to find this over and over again, the little foot that David puts on the back sides of these Zendrums so you can lay it on the table, the thumb hits that foot pad at exactly the same spot that my first 2 fingers hit the head and the rim of the snare drum. So now my first position is right there. Now, because we've got access now with the left hand to get to the other pads, all I have to do is just kind of roll it up a little bit. And again, I'm not moving a huge amount. So my first position now has all of the essential groove elements under my right hand, the main snare drum under my left hand, plus some percussion just above it. Real easy to get to everything. Now, for me, the second position for my right hand would be to move out just that much. And that gives me access to a secondary ride cymbal while still keeping the bass drum right there. And then the snare drum's all right there, so I don't have to move very much. Second position for the left hand slides to the end of the instrument where I have the cross stick, percussion, and one more cymbal. So again, I've only moved this far. So from here to here, not much movement at all. I can go up the neck this way. I can go up the neck this way. I'm not moving my hand very far. That's the key to this whole process. The third position for both hands brings me into the center, and this is where I keep the toms. So again, I don't have to move very far from one position to the second or to the third. Most of my playing is done in the home position. So this is the concept, and this is the design features that I wanted to bring to this custom shop Zendrum. I hope this makes sense for everybody else. Building a custom shop Zendrum is no small task. Like I said, it took close to 6 months, a little bit longer than 6 months to get from photo to this final Zendrum. And now I'm in good shape. I just need to work some more and get my left hand a little bit more used to the fact that I can actually do things because I can get to more triggers and more voices. So I'd like to thank you for watching, and most of all, I'd like to thank David Haney. When it comes to handcrafting a wooden instrument, I can think of nobody on the planet that does as good a job as David Haney and the guys at Zendrum. Thank you for watching.